December 2024. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're doing well. A little hard getting up and running that time, but we're up. I'm Dana. I hope you're doing well. You can call in 709-589-4406. Got a great show for everybody tonight. Don't forget to click around a little tiny bit. Costs very little and goes a long way. What Vladimir Putin's, the Russian president's nuclear-capable Orishnik missile means for the NATO security. NATO shouldn't exist. They were created in opposition of the Soviet Union, right? Now it's 32 countries, 32 militaries. If you look up NATO's 32 militaries. Big censorship my last two shows. Such is the life. Productions of Fukushima dried persimmons in full swing. It's in Date City. I'm going to have to go to the bigger screen because I know a lot of people use tablets or cell phones. And so it's hard enough to see it even on this screen. But at least this way I know everybody can see it, right? And Date City is right close to the Fukushima city. It's not very far from the nuclear meltdowns, which are right around behind me, basically. Date City, of course, is well known to be highly radioactive. And they never stopped growing food in the nuclear wasteland. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags. 30 million. So if you think nuclear is safe, go down and mark on those 30 million one-ton bags. Dana is wrong. And when you finish, I'll quit. A farmer in Date City, a nuclear wasteland, his workshop produces up to 2,000 radioactive fruits a day in a nuclear wasteland. It's absurd. And they didn't stop growing food in the nuclear wasteland. It's hard to appreciate it. I got a picture that kind of help articulates the madness of that statement. Think about this picture here where they're growing food in a nuclear no-go zone, a wasteland, a nuclear wasteland. And they're harvesting golden rice right alongside of thousands and thousands of one-ton bags of radiation. The bags are not waterproof. In fact, they're only meant to last about 2 years before they start breaking down through sun exposure. The whole story is absurd. But Japan has been doing that. They never stopped growing food. Each prefecture, and Fukushima is one of the bigger ones, are producing over 1 billion pounds a year of rice alone, and persimmons and peaches. The drying process takes about a month, and so the air is incredibly radioactive. On top of that, the reactors are still melting down. That story is just one great big betrayal every step of the way. What Japan is doing is absolutely unconscionable. And nothing artificial is used except for anthropogenic man-made radiation. Right. These are the most dangerous people on the planet who refuse to acknowledge what has happened. That's the scariest, and that's the true, I guess, for all the nuclear industry, right? University of Saskatchewan to host the Canadian National Nuclear Energy Management School with the International Atomic Energy Agency from May 26 to June the 6th, 2025, in cooperation with the Degenerate International Atomic Energy Agency. that doesn't have any sovereignty over any country. They're the very last people you want to be trusting. If they were doing their jobs, so-called jobs, that wouldn't happen, would it? And the University of Saskatchewan College of Engineering. Saskatchewan is in Canada. It's captured by the nuclear industry through the uranium mining a long time ago. The first of its kind program in Western Canada. They're the very last people should be doing it. Canada is supposed to be a spot the world looks to for common sense, and nuclear is not common sense. It's the first time the prestigious, calling nuclear prestigious is absurd again. It's a total betrayal. Will be hosted in Western Canada, provides foundational skills, knowledge regarding the life cycle of the disease factories / nuclear. And small modular reactors. So what are you talking about small modular reactors? They don't even exist. Is honored to host this esteem. So you have esteem and prestigious. This is meant to lull young people that are very complacent into wasting their lives and destroying everybody else's through the proliferation of anthropogenic man-made nuclear. Is Facebook seeking 4 gigawatts, which is enough to power 4 million homes and businesses, of new nuclear power, also known as disease factories, to meet AI, a threat to humanity in every way, because the nuclear plants themselves hemorrhage radiation from the fuel pools on a number that would terrify anybody if they appreciated the actual enormity of what's happening. And that artificial intelligence is a weapon. It's going to be used against you in every facet of your life. It's incredible technology, but it's weaponized against us and the species. There's no redeeming qualities whatsoever to this. Minister of Crown Investment Corporations, Minister responsible for Saskatchewan Power, Jeremy Harrison. Does important work led by the University of Saskatchewan, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and the Crown sectors. The International Atomic Energy Agency, what we noticed over the years, is thoroughly embedded in the governments of every country that they infiltrate. They're literally a plague in every facet of their work. A little barking there tonight. Blah. Fort William's First Nation Chief Michele Solomon provides reaction to the Nuclear Waste Management Organization selecting Revel Lake as the site for deep geological repository for nuclear waste, and says voices of opposition were not considered. I'm disappointed with the nuclear waste decision. And rightfully so. It was 100% hoodwink, wasn't it? Nuclear Waste Management Organization chose the Revel Lake site, not the other way around, as their preferred site for a big hole in the ground where they're going to dump their nuclear garbage that is going to contaminate everything for 1 billion years. After the First Nation expressed his willingness to proceed with the project, not to validate it, not to go ahead with it, but just to proceed with the environmental impact studies. It's absurd. That's what this industry is all about. It's all about being the worst scumbag imaginable. The worst of the worst humans all work for that industry. As the Non-Nuclear Waste Management Organization estimates construction could begin in 2033 of of the hole in the ground where they're going to pour all their nuclear, dump all their nuclear garbage that's toxic and splitting atoms for billions of years. And eventually will melt down. With operations to start by 2045. So it took them, if they start by 2045, that means it took them 43 years. And they had $26 billion to work with. They never grew a cent of interest on it. Or at least they didn't declare it. And there being a government, bloody well they grew a lot of interest on it, right? Stocks and bonds. And real estate investments. With operations to start by 2045, 43 years? 43 years. 43 years. After you gave them $26 billion, they woke up one morning and they said, okay, well, let's get started. 43 years. 43 years. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. 43 years. Who are these monsters anyway? 43 years, they let the radiation fuel rods hemorrhage into the environment. Because when you take the rods out of the reactor core, there's no containment. And now they're still splitting the same atoms they were to boil water for millions and millions of homes and businesses. And those atoms now have no containment, are released in your environment non-stop for 43 years longer than they needed to. And they had $26 billion to work with. $43 billion. Or 43 years. 43 years. For 43 years, they'd done everything but their job, and they had $26 billion to work with. If that doesn't make you incredibly upset, I don't know what should. The fight's not over. Anti-nuclear First Nation leaders who were betrayed said. This stuff will eventually melt down. If you leave this on, if you don't take care of this stuff, it melts down at some point. And once you crack open the earth, it's no longer has the integrity of the earth itself. Right? Once you dig into that, you lost that integrity. The fight's not over. Northern Ontario chief says he received many phone calls after the Non-Nuclear Waste Management Organization announced it had chosen a site for a nuclear waste repository without a referendum, without a vote, without the consent of the Canadians, let alone the local populations. And they didn't know what to do. They'd done the best they could, but they didn't know how to fight back, and they weren't provided with ability to fight back. They were given, for the most part, the people that they sought out, through the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, a non-nuclear waste management organization, were the controlled opposition, right? And then the ones that were trying to educate the population had very little traction at all, very little support. Whereas the Nuclear Waste Management Organization gave the controlled opposition whatever they wanted. Offices, vehicles, wages, refreshments, you name it, whatever they wanted. Permanent office to lull people in there and make them complacent. Truly the worst humans conceivable. The very worst of the worst humans are the people that work for the nuclear industry. The most despicable people we've ever heard tell of are the ones that work for the nuclear industry. The vote tally for the referendum has not been disclosed. Because they love you so much. The vote tally for the referendum has not been disclosed. The whole story is so crazy. So I used an investment calculator just at the Bank of Canada at the bank's annual rate, interest rate of 3.2% and inflation of 2.1%. So the effects of the inflation over a decade was the money lost $10 billion. And the total future value of the investment, based on, what did I put in there? Or by now, over 22 years, they would have made 33, or the money would have grown from 26 billion to 33 billion. But we're talking banks. We're not talking about stocks. Not about real estate, which would have tripled, quadrupled their money. You know, that's what they're doing with it. I'm assuming they spent the money on uranium or something to prop it up after Fukushima. So where did the interest go? How come they had $26 billion when they started in 2002, and they only got $26 billion today? How does that actually work, I wonder? Because spending $1 billion is a big deal. Spending $7 billion is an incredible, difficult task when you got nothing to show for it. These are the worst humans conceivable. Not these, but the Nuclear Waste Management Organization and nuclear industry itself. Most indigenous communities do not support nuclear energy, says the report. And we know one activist we had on 2 days ago went up, knocked on doors in Ignis, and everybody, except for a few, vehemently said no to the idea of hosting a disease factory in their local communities or anywhere near them. Revitalizing nuclear. The UK can power AI. Again, we see these connotations, artificial intelligence, and lead to clean energy transition. Nuclear is not clean. It's the most resource intensive industry, period, bar nothing. Every time I hear the word clean energy and nuclear, you know you're being manipulated and deceived. I'm very slow tonight. What have I got done here? La 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 la. Just hang with me 1 second here. No energy again today. We got a serious windstorm for Thursday night and Friday. So I got to go, whether I like it or not, I got to go outdoors and start staking stuff down tomorrow. Let me see here. Yeah, I'm stupid here tonight. I got no idea what I'm doing here. Let me go backwards. Oh, it's right there. Yeah. Nuclear. Bear with me. It takes a second. Nuclear is the dirtiest energy in human history, bar nothing. Every facet of nuclear is insane. The definition of insane is calling nuclear clean. It can never be clean. It's the most resource-intensive industry we've ever seen. Almost there. I'm just going to do a short version. I'm just struggling at the beginning of the show tonight. I'm having a hard time with everything. So first off, every nuclear plant needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants to run the disease factories themselves. And so a nuclear plant, for instance, it boils 1 million gallons a minute, but say 16 million glasses of water a minute. And when salt water, a glass of salt water would have 1 billion creatures into it. The eggs, the larvae, the small fries, 75 to 100 million of the creatures in every glass of water are the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. So there's 16 million billion creatures dying every second for each reactor, and there's 413 reactors worldwide. And there's 1,440 minutes in a day. And every one of the reactors sites need 2 gas, oil, coal. Typically coal plants, because they're the cheapest, right? But what happened in Japan mitigates any redeeming qualities nuclear might have had. Not that they did. But they picked up 30 million. It was 150,000 sites like this right here. They spent 30 years going out, dropping it into the ocean. 30 years. And they've spent 80 years just dumping it in the ground. And then that ends up immediately in your water tables. Imagine abandoning your supermarkets, your schools, your skyscrapers, your hospitals, your graveyards, because you were foolish enough to let nuclear anywhere near your country. The United Kingdom spent 30 years, 24 hours a day, with these special freighters that would bring waste out there. It was so radioactive, they got to dump it. And because the Atlantic, where the United Kingdom is to, the continental shelf is not very deep and is very big. And so they weren't dumping this in the deep ocean, which is just as bad anyway. They were dumping it actually on the continental shelf. And the continental shelf is the nursery of the oceans. That's where the migratory species go to lay their eggs, right? They're mining. The amount of work they do for mining to get their little pellets are absurd. Yet they say the pellet is equal to a ton of oil. But they waste 2 tons of oil trying to produce it. These ponds at uranium mines are chemical ponds. They're evaporated into the environment. This is a picture of Hanford. Hanford, just in one instance during the Manhattan Project, dumped 450 billion gallons of stuff that went through a chain reaction, sludge, because you were in your infancy back then, right? Sludge into the ground, which is equal to a radioactive aquarium 6 feet wide, full of radioactive sludge that if you walk past a gallon of it, you'll drop dead. It's equal to an aquarium of that kind of stuff, that kind of toxicity, lethal toxicity, 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet more than once. San Francisco, just off San Francisco, in this one island, they turned it into a nature reserve after, because that's what monsters do. There was 55,000 of these drums, 45-gallon drums, dumped into the ocean. Ones that didn't sink right away were shot. And because the lids and the bottoms are crimped on, every 33 feet, there's 14.8 pounds per square inch or so. And what that means is that time it gets down to 100 feet, it crushes. And so everything immediately is released into the ecosystem. You notice all the spider webs are deformed? Imagine abandoning community after community after community because your power plant broke down. And that the equipment they use to mine the uranium is the most resource intensive on the planet. The whole process is the most resource intensive on the bloody planet. Revitalizing, and so calling it clean energy is an absolute, it's an unconscionable betrayal. Stupid artificial intelligence, it's great, but it's stupid because it's going to be weaponized against us and the species. It's ushering in a new era of infrastructure and energy. Geothermal, wind, solar, and new forms of ocean power are being developed, but one of the most significant implications is nuclear is back. Nuclear's not back. Solar is going to be 660 gigawatts this year. Nuclear had put no new gigawatts on the grid worldwide whatsoever. Nothing. Let's see if I get it right this time. Because I transferred the proper stuff, because the numbers are always changing for renewables. Renewable loves making me work like a dog. I put it everywhere so I could find it. Now I can't find it. So hang on. Gonna be what it's gonna be. I can't tell us. There it is. It's right where it's supposed to be. Where I can't find it right away. I don't know why it does that to me. Who knows? So global solar power installations may hit 660 gigawatts worldwide in 2024. Nuclear is not going to put anything on the grid. So a gigawatt is enough to power 1 million homes and businesses. Why are you looking at nuclear when solar, rather, is putting 660 gigawatts in a single year? The total grid capacity for gas, oil, and coal worldwide is around 4,800 gigawatts. They expect this to grow by 40% a year, and it has for the last number of years, despite the Ukraine scam which caused artificial inflation on all the commodities. It still grew, and if they didn't cause, that was done on purpose. If they didn't have that happen, renewables would curb stomp everything on the planet by now. But it's still looking that way. Countries like the United States, South Korea, Canada, France, and Japan have all committed to new nuclear programs, but they haven't produced anything. They don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the supply network, they don't have the manpower, they don't have the money, they don't have the places. The real estate for this kind of energy is very unique. They're not even trying. There's no announcements. There's no contracts handed out. It's just posturing. There is no nuclear renaissance. They're doing that in order to artificially inflate the stocks in nuclear that they got for dirt cheap, so they can cash it in by Christmas. That's why. And you're seeing a big push right now on the so-called small modular reactors, which don't exist. I mean, it literally, like, and particularly the stuff they're talking about, like the Canadian small reactors, modular. You know what modular means? You can move it here, move it there. The Canadian small modular reactors, the boiling water reactor 300, General Electric's, are 24-story buildings. There's 12 stories underground, for goodness sakes. That's not a modular, even though they're calling that a modular in order to get the tax breaks and the funding for new development for something that's not small, not modular. They don't know if they can reopen 3 Mile Island. It's like 100% conjecture, but people are buying stocks in nuclear based upon a conjecture. And we see this every 2 or 3 weeks. The same misrepresentation, the same deceit, the same dishonesty. If the world had not turned away from nuclear after Chernobyl, energy-related CO2 emissions could have been 6% lower in 2023, the same taken 450 million passenger vehicles off the highway for a year. That's, first off, carbon doesn't pulse energy almost at the speed of light every second. That's what nuclear does. Nuclear plumes cover the whole planet. Carbon grows trees and plants and insects and animals and everything else, humans. La, 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 la. Hang on, wait for it. So, equal to taking 450 million passenger cars off the road each year. Okay. So, one container ship is equal to 50 million cars. There's 90,000 of them on the ocean at any given time, by the way. And 15 container ships create more pollution than all the cars on the planet. So what's the bigger problem, the cars on the planet or the 90,000 container ships that are on the planet at any given time? And that 15 of them is equal to the 700 plus million cars worldwide currently. 760 million cars. They just make stuff up. That's what they do. It's an industry with zero redeeming qualities. There's not a single person in the industry that is trustworthy under even the best circumstances. There's literally not a single person in the nuclear industry that you should put your faith into. And there's certainly not a single person in the nuclear industry that the world respects and admires or acknowledges. There's nobody, like every industry has someone familiar, right? Social media, you got Mark Zuckerberg. For electric cars, you got Elon Musk. For nuclear, you got nobody. And the ones that they do got there are the worst chicken eggs you'll ever come across. So that's a plume model. Carbon doesn't make plume models covering the whole planet. That covered the whole planet from Fukushima in just 26 days. But carbon doesn't do that. Carbon only goes 20 or 30 miles from the source. But what carbon does, it helps grow plants. You can't have trees or we'll look like the moon without carbon. Carbon doesn't go up into the solar system, doesn't go up into the upper troposphere, the atmosphere, or anything else. But nuclear does. This is a model from the French government. This is the same as any other model worldwide on radioactive fallout from Japan. I'm going to stop it at 20 days. Right there. That's 20 days of radioactive fallout. That's considered, according to the French government, that's 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137. That never goes away. That pulses energy almost at the speed of light, every one of them. And snowstorm, pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. If your power plant breaks down, do you get the media to pretend they're in a building that doesn't exist? Even when the building blows up. If your gas, oil, and coal plant blows up, are you worried about carbon? I can show you headlines where they say 60 people 60 and older should be prepared to die at Fukushima. And did you see pictures like this? We got this is just a fraction of mainstream media claiming they're on top of a building that don't exist. Where one container ship is equal to 50 million cars worth of pollution, and they're telling you that more nuclear will fix this. Do They can't open their mouth without committing crimes against humanity, these people. The United States is not considering transferring nuclear weapons to Ukraine, says the chicken necks. Who knows for sure, right? Jamaica's going nuclear, but slowly. James Lewis put out a great song, a crazy good song. He actually put out another one tonight here. But he put out a crazy good song a few days back on Jamaica. This is on anti-nuclear. It was really good. This is really. It'll always be good. It's not just really good right now. It'll always be good. The Jamaican government, one of the most impoverished governments in the Western nations, signed a memorandum of understanding with United Atomic Energy of Canada Limited. These are the worst humans imaginable. Atomic Energy of Canada Limited and the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories to advance the adoption of nuclear technology in the country. First off, there's zero possibility that's going to come to fruition. And second off, these are the worst humans conceivable. If they work at Chalk River National Laboratories, the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, these are degenerates. Holness noted that the modern nuclear technologies, particularly small modular reactors, are cost-effective solutions, reduces environmental impacts, and have enhanced safety features, and they don't exist. You can't quantify that assertion when they don't exist. Right? You don't. And like, I'm not very good at sugarcoating a lot of this stuff because I've been at it forever. And I don't feel it's appropriate to sugarcoat my distaste and my contempt for these monsters, these sadistic demons, these twisted. These troublemakers. Just bear with me here. I'm slow today. I'm so slow today. That's ridiculous how slow I am. It's unspeakable what this industry has done. Since 1984, the country's operated the Caribbean-only nuclear reactor, a research reactor at the University of West Indies, the Mona campus. Even these small modular reactors, they're doing sex ratio studies within a 50-mile radius. They're studying the whole population within 50 miles to see if they find a discrepancy in the males and female populations. Because you know what's going to happen. So they're going to get the money to do the research. They know that's going to happen, and that's the effects of releases from the fuel pools at that facility, which is storing the used fuel. Just because they're only a small energy, it's still nuclear, it's still going through a neutron bombardment, it's still splitting atoms forever on its own, and the containment, there's usually no containment on these disease factories. Small modular, or the research reactors, I'm sorry, they got containments, but the fuel pools have no containment, right? The facility was instrumental in advancing research and in the worst applications, like using nuclear for agricultural, health, and environmental protections. They can't back that up with science. That's one of the most terrifying things conceivable about this industry, is it doesn't have science on their side. Scientists just measured an atom on the brink of existence. They dumped 1.4 million 300,000 gallon containers into the soil. Those big, if you go to an oil site, you see those great big 300-gallon tanks. They dumped 1.4 million of them directly into the soil. They're not trying to come up with solutions to claw some of that back. No. They're taking all their money and burning it on what's eventually going to destroy all the species and humanity. That's what they do. The cutting-edge facility, you hear that on everything. Everything is prestigious, the esteemed cutting-edge facilities for the rare isotope beams that attacks everything with replicating cells have precisely measured the mass of aluminum-22. Well, whoopee. So what if a functional savant, borderline autism academic done that? because it's just going to be weaponized against you. There's never going to be any redeeming qualities coming out of this industry. After 80 years, they haven't produced any. They're not going to. Colossal spending on nuclear arsenal at American families' expense. We've covered so many of these types of stories. Running a significant budget deficit of $1.83 trillion, the United States plans to spend $1.5 trillion to overhaul its useless nuclear arsenal that it can't use. Co-op horror game Nuclear Nightmare is under $2 on Steam and doing great. Nuclear Nightmare. Well, hopefully it teaches the vulnerable people that are playing these games to hate nuclear. Serbia lifts a moratorium on nuclear power. Remember Serbia? Remember this guy when they had the first annual nuclear power meeting with the International Atomic Energy Agency was hosting it. We covered it 8 months ago or something. And they had all these politicians from different countries participating in it. And this guy here, remember him with that weird lip? He was always holding that weird lip in his teeth between each sentence. Looks like he got punched out that day. They don't have, there's free money to be had for some of these politicians. So after 35 years, the moratorium on the construction of disease factories was lifted. But first off, they're a perfect place for geothermal. Why would you use nuclear when geothermal is everywhere? And the techniques now for getting geothermal are feasible for anybody. Any community can build their own geothermal. And one of the best techniques we're seeing is pneumatic cutters, where it's 25,000 pounds per square inch is able to cut the hard rocks, and then they have a pneumatic hammer that crushes that, and then the drill bit goes through that. So it's 6 times faster than the best drillers on the planet can do. And quasi-electric is used in another interesting one where they vaporize the rocks. So rather than drilling down, they just their system, I can't remember how to explain it, but their system is basically vaporizing the rocks. So there's no limit on how deep they can drill. And geothermal is everywhere, right? There's nowhere on the planet you're not going to run into geothermal. And typically, the issue was the drill bits, once you get so deep, it's very hot there, and it's rough on the drill bits, right? But they resolved that. And you can get hotter temperatures from geothermal than you can from gas, oil, coal, or nuclear. And then every facet is recyclable. And they can harvest minerals, lithium and minerals and gold and everything else. But you can have a closed loop system, right? We got a story coming up about that. Geothermal is the way forward, and back it up by wind and solar. Wind's great because it's always blowing somewhere. History was written today, she added. Yeah. So Serbia doesn't have the money. They can barely, their sewage system is barely functionable. Their garbage system is literally almost non-functional. They don't have the capital, they don't have the manpower, they don't have the supply network, they don't have the corporations, and the ones that are bidding on it are just speculating. Inside a growing nuclear medicine company, Spectron RX, Business of Health reporter. First off, you don't want me to show you the headlines, what radiation does to your loved ones in the hospital. You really don't. You might have to, but bear with me. Here's a doctor here's a doctor I'm going to bring up for you in a second. Here we go. Here's a doctor. Let me do a test run. It probably wouldn't hurt to turn the audio up.
All the autopsies I've done of cancer patients, everything I've seen in all the autopsies I've done of cancer patients, not one of them died of cancer. They died of liver failure, they died of cardiac failure, renal failure, all due to chemotherapy. We got a patient that had been through chemo and radiation, and they had cooked her liver and cooked her kidneys. We looked at the blood work and realized she had no organ function to speak of left. And I said, we can make her more comfortable, but the radiation treatment that they used on her has actually destroyed her organs. So we did what we could. She'd been given 3 weeks, we gave her 6 months. And she got time to say goodbye to her family. But I remember walking into the office the morning after she passed, and this internist was sitting on the waiting room couch. And I said, what's the problem? And she looked at me and she said, I'm doing the death certificate and I don't know what to write for cause of death. I said, you might try writing the truth for a change. And she said, you know how much trouble I can get in by doing that. I said, if you're going to study with me, you're going to write the truth. And she wrote radiation poisoning, cause of death. She's the only doctor I've ever seen do that. She actually had the courage to tell the truth.
Which is a crime in the industry, right? The great British nuclear fantasy. There's the small modular reactor hype in Canada. We're seeing a massive amount of small modular reactor narratives and encouragement of people to buy stocks. And all of it is just, it's complete propaganda. It's 100% propaganda. There is no small modular reactor. There is no nuclear renaissance, let alone small modular reactors. We've been sitting on 16 likes for the whole show. Is Facebook seeking 4 gigawatts, which is like 4 million homes and businesses of nuclear power, new nuclear power, they're going to build, and also known as disease factories, to meet artificial intelligence a threat to humanity? Yes, it is. And there is an absurd push, which is absurd because countries are not going to, there is no renaissance. The amount of nuclear that came on last year and this year and the year before, for instance, was less than what they lost when offline. Whereas there's 660 gigawatts of just solar power, not counting wind and everything else. And storage, there's many ways to storage, and every time you read a story where they say they're going to use batteries to store electricity for a big city or big projects, these people they're getting the money to do that, and then say, see, it's no good. The solutions are many. There's compressed air storage, where you just dig mine shafts and compress air down to the mine shaft. Any community can do this. And you can buy windmills. That's all they do is compress air. And so if you do it right, you got enough storage there for 5 or 6 days. And ideally you would do, there's many different ways. There's a couple of great ways, like lava rocks and sand will hold 600-700 degree Fahrenheit temperatures for months. There's no shortage of that stuff. But one of the ones that anybody can do, if they don't have a lot of land, is what's known as water batteries, where you create 2 reservoirs and you just keep pumping water from one to the top one, just recycling the water over and over and over. And so if you use a combination of compressed air storage into mine shafts, and then the heat that you create for compression can be stored in sand and lava rocks and stuff like that. And then you can unpack that heat to expand the air that you compressed. And you can hold on to that heat for up to several months, apparently, with sand and lava rocks. Lava rocks will actually hold heat up to 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. Right? And so Iceland and can make a huge contribution to the renewable industry by chopping up lava and shipping that to countries that want to create batteries to store energy in the form of heat, because heat can be converted, right? Canada touts the small modular reactors that are 24-story buildings. So to call them small modular reactors is it's pretty crazy. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And U.S. investors run for cover, which is the smartest investor out there. United Kingdom will waste billions watching the industry slowly crumble. They just announced they're going to spend $180 billion trying to decommission the reactors they got. Does anybody really think that that's not going to triple? Yes. The state of play in the United Kingdom's mirrors the unbridled hype in Canada. The unbridled hype is right to it. With province like Ontario putting nuclear ahead of more affordable, genuinely green energy options, and the industry's brazenly hiring departing provincial cabinet ministers to guide its lobbying efforts. It's just simply a money grab. They're not trying to come up with a product. That in spite of independent analysts declaring small modular reactors a Hail Mary, unlikely to succeed, and pointing out that, in contrast to the private power markets in U.S., Canada's most public utilities make it easier for small modular reactor proponents to avoid transparency on cost. And let the taxpayers, ratepayers, assume the risk if things go wrong. Well, they know it's going to go wrong. It's engineered to go wrong. Two distinguished academics who have spent much of their career studying the electricity industry have produced a comprehensive study that says this latest nuclear renaissance won't happen. You can't call a nuclear renaissance when it doesn't exist, right? So this latest future nuclear renaissance won't happen, so they should. Better for the country to cut its losses now and cancel the program than continue to waste billions letting the nuclear industry crumble slowly. Well, that's what the industry wants your country to crumble slowly. Death by a billion cuts. And currently the French Electric Giant, which is the French government, EDF is the French government itself, is building two 1,600 megawatt European pressurized high pressure water reactors at Hinkley Point in Somerset. So 13 years later than the original schedule, and the cost has escalated 18 billions. When the contracts were signed in 2016 to 35 billion in 2024, and they're far, far away. And that's in 2015 prices, for goodness sakes. And that's they're still forever away from coming to fruition. The two professors say the government should cut its losses now and pull the plug on the project. Everybody's been screaming that in their faces for several years. Even more pointless, according to the two academics, is a small modular reactor competition, which has four companies: Rolls-Royce, Westinghouse, Holtec, and perpetually degenerate General Electric. Putting forward designs all have the same basic idea: is build the reactors in factories, assemble them at sites all over Britain. So you got infinitely better chances of having a catastrophic event. With the more reactors, the more likely it is you're going to contaminate your country and your water and your land. This, they claim, would be more efficient in building large reactors and therefore produce cheaper electricity. It doesn't, like, the reason we build the large reactors is because the small ones, first off, are so difficult and so inefficient. And we know the small modular reactor is going to produce 5 times more high-level waste. And 35 times more dangerous, deadly intermediate level waste, and 30 times more deadly, dangerous, what they call low level waste. There's no dose that it doesn't come out with significant harms, permanent harm. Your body, any anthropogenic man-made isotopes, atoms you get in your body attacks it for the rest of your entire life with white blood cells. And so when you got a white blood cell, it means you displaced a red blood cell, and the red blood cell carries oxygen nutrition. So this is catastrophic health consequences that are tangible, that are acknowledged, that are recognizable, and that are catastrophic to your health. And this is forever. Your body never stops attacking until it tries to build a sarcophagus around the source. And eventually it builds a sarcophagus around it, and you call it a tumor. That's your reaction, because your body is not naturally from the solar system. Your body doesn't recognize it. Right? So it treats it as a foreign entity, which it is, and it's pulsing energy every second, almost at the speed of light. So it's wrecking chromosomes, DNA, cells. It's causing permanent lesions to your organs. And your body tries to repair that every second. It does this every second in every direction. And because we have so much now released into the environment for so long, and Fukushima was a pulse event, all the fuel pools, there's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide that are each create a plume like that every day. And that's assimilated into trees and plants, and pollen and animals and insects and water forever. It never becomes inert. Even like if it decays all the way down to lead, it's still considered radioactive lead, right? And so they decided just to whitewash it and say that it was innocuous or benign, but it's not. It's radioactive. It's pulsing energy. Even though it's a small amount, it's small enough to hurt something, because we live in a soup of life. Well, we did until the nuclear industry showed up. The government said it's prepared to spend $20 billion to 2038 to get these up and running, which is nowhere near enough. Not even enough for one of the reactor sites. But the report pointed out none of the designs have been completed, let alone tested. So there's no evidence that the claim for them can be justified. And they point out nuclear power has a long history of overpromising and never delivering. The small modular reactors, you have 100 companies. So this should tell you a lot. They got 100 companies with their own designs. And we're 80 years down the rabbit hole. They still haven't come up with a solution. You got 100 companies out there getting investors and looking for, and getting handouts, rather, not looking for, but getting handouts for huge amounts for speculation. They don't even have a design. They don't have a piece of land. None of them have a piece of land where they're planning on building it. But you can't build it until you can't produce them, first off, till you go through a whole regulatory process. No matter how many corners you cut, you still got to build it on one of the national laboratory sites. That takes a lot of funding, a lot of coordination, a lot of manpower, resources, precious metals, supply chains, experts. They simply don't have the resources anymore worldwide. There's been no nuclear renaissance since the 70s. So that manpower is retired. And when people, students are going to universities, they look at nuclear and they go a little deeper, and they can't fool all the students, only the autism ones, which is the ones they seek out, by the way. You got 100 companies for small modular reactors. Same thing for fusion, by the way. You got 100 companies for small modular reactors with their own designs. And so you got to get the kinks out of it. You got to build it. You got to get the kinks out of it. You got to run it hard for a decade. Then you got to resubmit it back to the regulatory agencies. They have to prove it. Once it goes into the regular agencies, you're talking about 1 million pieces of paper. So the regulatory agency, you got to hire 300 or 400 people to shift through that. They're going to find flaws. You got to submit it back to the engineers. Engineers got to redesign and submit those flaws back into the regulatory agencies. They have to go through that. Once it passes everything, 15, 20 years down the road, you built a reactor, you got to run it for a decade to find out if it has flaws, re-engineer those flaws, edit designs. You have to build another one to make sure it actually works. Then, and only then, can you apply to mass produce it. I can't just come up with a design, buy a chunk of land, buy the equipment, start producing it. It doesn't work that way. It's not coming. You're not going to see it. But if the investors know that, they're not going to put a cent into it, right? And so that is kept out of the investors' lexicon. Nuclear hype ignores high costs, long timelines. No, it's about hoodwinking the factory workers have worked all their lives and is looking for something to invest their monies in, and it's meant to steal their money. That's what it's all about. They do it every 3 weeks, right? For the last 13 years, we covered this every 3 weeks. Nuclear options are still years away, decades and decades away. Not years, but decades. Solar, wind, storage, geothermal are clean, cost-effective options ready now. Period. End of argument. But they don't. If the investors find out, they're not going to invest in disgusting, despicable, creepy, nasty, frightful, obnoxious, gross, yucky, spineless, weak academics in the nuclear industry, right? Ugh. Every time I take it to people in the nuclear industry, it's just it's hideous, it's ghastly, right? How's the poll doing tonight? Is Facebook seeking 4 gigawatts of dirty, disgusting nuclear power, also known as disease factories, to meet AI, which is going to be weaponized against humanity and the species, a threat to humanity? Because all the they're going to be split in atoms. Once you take the fuel out of those 4 gigawatt reactors, these 5 reactors, so they're talking about 5 reactors. Once you take the fuel out of that, it goes into a pool, it's splitting atoms into your environment for 24 hours a day. It never stops splitting atoms. That's the problem with nuclear fuel. That's the nightmare of nuclear fuel. People can't wrap their mind around it for some reason. They keep coming up with reasons for not accepting what the issue is for nuclear fuel. Why is nuclear fuel so dangerous? Because it's splitting atoms all day long. If you breathe it in, you get sick and die. It might not manifest for a decade or 2 or 3 or 4, but it's 100% is going to cause your health to immediately go downhill because your body's under siege with white blood cells for the rest of your life. The stuff is in your body. And almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. If that doesn't creep you out, what does? Japan eyes next generation solar power equivalent to 20 nuclear reactors. That is a crazy headline. Is it not? The Japanese government is planning to generate 20 gigawatts of electricity equivalent to the output of 20 nuclear reactors through thin and bendable solar cells in fiscal 2040. Solar panels quickly spread throughout Japan after the Fukushima disaster. It still doesn't come close to the reality. Triggered by a devastating, and they always got to put that connotation of triggered by an earthquake, triggered by a tsunami. They never want people to think for a split second that nuclear has an issue. They always got to find some reason to blame it. And if you look at the propaganda of 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and all the other nuclear disease factories, they'll find a flaw to blame it on. It can't be the nuclear industry. It can't be anything to do with the nuclear industry. Nuclear industry is perfect. It has never made a mistake. It has never hurt a fly. And you'll find all kinds of politicians and lobbyists and mouthpieces and idiots out there regurgitating that particular narrative. So bendable solar panels, light resilient to bending distortion, can be placed on buildings, walls, windows, car roofs, among other places. That revolution, we covered a story a few years back where they produced I think it was MIT, had produced a solar-powered paint where you would just paint your wall or your house or whatever, and then connect your wires to that, and that would be your electricity, right? Another great, I came up, my idea for a perfect solar power was a Christmas tree effect. So if you make a Christmas tree and spray it with the solar power material, for instance, it doesn't matter which way the sun is shining, that tree is going to be really effective, right? And there's a lot of surface in the tree. So if you were able to master the solar power spray-on solution, then you can just dip your trees in that. And then when you drive by a large section of land full of trees, because you can make the trees in different sizes, it wouldn't seem very offensive, right? That's just me. I'm stupid. The Non-Nuclear Waste Management Organization proceed with site characterization process in Wabigou Lake, Ojibwe Nation territory. They got stupid and stupider alongside of each other. It doesn't make them right. Usually when you put two idiots together, you end up very scary. And they got these little models, and they got these big signs behind them, and they got their offices in every one of these little communities, and people don't get to watch my video. They only get to listen to shithead and shitface. From the Non-Nuclear Waste Management Organization. And the weirdo in the red there, she's the president CEO of the Non-Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which will be 43 years before they have the facility built. 43 years. And somebody should pin her up against the wall and ask her, how come you haven't grown any interest in 22 years on $26 billion? Don't expect a reporter to do it. That's not their job. Their job is to convince you that everything is perfect. Stupid Japan is intending to use mixed oxide fuel. They say they're doing it to get rid of their plutonium stocks, but you can downblend plutonium, mix it with soil and stuff like that, and put it in some kind of repository. You don't have to, because the problem with the plutonium we're talking about is it's already gone through a chain reaction. So once it goes through a chain reaction, it's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Try to wrap your mind around that statement. So imagine a little pill that will kill you. Then imagine that you need something 2 billion times smaller than that to kill you when it comes to nuclear. And once it goes through a chain reaction the second time, the isotopes it's producing are really something we're not familiar with. We actually don't have a lot of information on that because, and why are they hiding that from us? Why is it so important for them to hide the emissions from the plutonium mixed oxide fuel / MOX fuel? It's not actually MOX fuel, it's plutonium MOX fuel is the proper pronunciation. It's the same thing with tritium. It's not actually tritium, it's tritium-3H. It's man-made tritium. But you very rarely, if at all, will hear them called tritium-3H from the nuclear industry, right? MHI previously supplied 54 MOX fuel assemblies. The assemblies are typically around 1,800 pounds. There's 100 fuel rods, and each fuel rod is 12 feet and weighs 18 pounds. And will supply high-quality MOX. MOX. What are you going to do with it when you take it out of the reactor on top of that? Because it's hideous. And reactor 3 at Fukushima was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. Let me show you a picture of what that looks like. These were 190-foot, 65-meter, 19-story buildings. There's reactor 3 over there and reactor 4 right here at Fukushima. There was 4 of these reactors. At the top of each of the buildings were 8 reactor cores. in the fuel pools. There was 2 fuel pools at the top of each building. They're gone. There's no longer 190-foot, 65-meter, 19-story buildings there. They're stumps. The reactor cores and the fuel pools were at the very top of the buildings. And they covered that up. They successfully hid that. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency on August 24th last year, that never happened. If that doesn't concern you, you need to watch a few of my videos to get up to speed. And I can assure you, once you watch a few of my videos, this will start concerning you. And appropriately and rightfully so. And we need you to get educated and think about ways that you can contribute to putting a wrench in the gears of this industry. I've been at this for so long. I really don't know how to do anything else anymore. That's how bad it is. Because it's such a dangerous industry. We don't have any advocates out there that are switched on, that are capable of articulating what the issues are. Like the people that watch me regularly, there's nobody out there going to beat these people in a conversation about the facts. There's nobody going to challenge anybody that comes here regularly about the facts. They're going to bludgeon the pro-nuclear community on the drop of a hat just for fun. They're literally going to laugh in their faces when they hear the lies after you've been here a few times. So at the top of the buildings, there are 2 fuel pools and a reactor core. It's at the top of the buildings. They're gone. You know where they're gone? They're long gone. They went kapooey and left these stumps. Like, this is absurd amount we're talking about. Now, the Chernobyl reactor was a graphite reactor. It was a new reactor. It's only a couple of years old. It didn't have any fuel pools in the building or at the top of the building, and it hadn't changed any fuel either on top of that. And so that's a totally different fuel than these buildings. These were that one over there was the plutonium mixed oxide reactor. This is absurd material we're talking about, and amounts. And that each of these reactor cores, there's 9 in each building. Each of those reactor cores, not the 9 of them, but each one of those 9 are equal to 100 Chernobyls because they're pure uranium, pure plutonium. And that over there, I don't even know how you would list that. That would be 1,000 Chernobyls, just a reactor core, not counting the 8 reactor cores in the fuel pool at the top of the buildings. This is why we see an extinction event playing out. A sneak preview of Peter Dutton's nuclear costing. So he was, they were in administration for, 10 years in Australia? And they ignored nuclear for that whole time. Now that they're out, they're like, we want nuclear. Come on, let's give us nuclear. And you can tell who they're beholden to. It's pretty despicable what they're trying to do. They're trying to destroy the country with the most resources for geothermal and solar and wind. Our research indicates the conventional nuclear power station costs anywhere between $14.9 to $27.5 million per megawatt to construct. Geothermal is less than $5 million per megawatt. And geothermal is plug and play, plug and walk away too. Like we got headlines where if you're 60 and older, you should be prepared to die at Fukushima, because it really did blow up and eject the reactor. That's the actual reactor 3. That's the fuel pools with 8 reactor cores and the reactor core running, ejected right into the buildings. The plutonium mixed oxide fuel, when they cook off at about 200,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures hotter than a typical nightmare reactor cooking off, exploding, right? So for every megawatt of nuclear, you can do 5 of geothermal for the same price. And the prices come down a lot more than the numbers I'm giving you about 6 years ago at $5 million in a megawatt. And any company can build, anybody can build their own geothermal plant. Anybody can. You don't need the government, the local community to back you up. You can build it yourself. You put your mind to it. They've accumulated significant finance interest costs over a lengthy construction period ranging between 9 to 18 years. I think 18 years is pretty appropriate because once you get it built after 15, 16 years, it always takes 2 or 3 years to get it up to full power. And who knows how much they got to replace. It's absurd. It's absurd to build nuclear anyway. Once you take the fuel out of the reactor core and put it in the pool, you're going to poison everybody forever. Well, yet to be commercialized, small modular reactors are promised to achieve shorter build time, but they don't exist. They shouldn't even be in the conversation. They shouldn't be brought up. Somewhere in the far, far future, there might be this contraption called a small modular reactor. That's the only line they should ever get. Only blurp blurp they should ever get. The only one that has progressed to a construction contract in the developed world would have cost $28.9 million per megawatt. This is absurd numbers. When you can do geothermal for $5 million, solar power for less than half of that. But geothermal is 24 hours a day. And you can just build a new geothermal plant alongside of it 50 years down the road. When it's finished, you turn off the old one and turn on a new one, and you recycle everything there and get it ready to build another one in 50 years. The problem with nuclear is just bear with me, see if I can find it. It's kind of important actually, so I got to bring it up. Oh, to be. Here we go. Gonna make me do it the hard way. It's just the way it is around here. It's not the hard way, it just means I gotta type. Type like your life depends on it. La 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 la. I'm gonna show you something just wow. I'm gonna show you like a wow moment here. Every nuclear power plant on the planet, except for a couple of them, has this particular attribute. Japan is taking it to a whole different world. Yeah, we're almost ready. Here we go. So why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? Because every fuel pool on these sites, each reactor has 2 fuel pools. There's multiple reactors on each of the nuclear power plants, right? Why is except for a few, why is almost every nuclear reactor surrounded by farms? I was shocked, I had postulated, because I was seeing a lot of these pictures because I cover a lot of these stories, and I was starting to realize, wait a second, this is quite a long time ago. Why am I seeing farms around every? So I was like, oh shit. And so I spent a couple hours gathering up like aerial shots of nuclear sites. And by the time I got to 100, I was like, holy shit, every picture. Every nuclear power plant. But we know now there's a few that are not. But almost every nuclear power plant is either surrounded by population, very high populated areas, or by farms. Does anybody really think that's an accident? Because the fuel pools are those tall skinny stacks? They're the ones, you can see it in the background way down there, they're the ones that are pumping radiation. They're pumping the radiation from the fuel pools. Why is almost every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? Because that's engineered in to whisk the radiation fallout from the fuel pools away from the site, from the bioaccumulation, and to poison you in the supermarkets. They are targeting you. So a lot of this food is meant for certain populations. And then wherever that's being shipped to, they're going to buy stocks in the local pharmaceutical companies because they're going to make a fortune from the diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. I mean, it can't be an accident that every nuclear power plant, except for a few, are surrounded by farms. It simply can't be an accident, can it? And that they have studies Like, so they know grapevines are going to suck up the radiation. They know strawberries are going to suck up radiation. They know plants are going to suck up radiation. They know foliage and roots are going to suck up radiation. Potatoes are going to suck up the radiation. They know that the fruit trees are going to suck up radiation. The fruit plants are going to suck up the radiation. They know that wheat is going to suck up the radiation, that the soil transferred by the tree root the radiation. Know the meadow ecosystems. So why are they building these plants in prime farmland, the dumps in prime farmland? And I remember this picture distinctly when I first seen it. I was like, oh man, oh shit. And every fuel pool, you see that tall, skinny, red and white striped stack? That's where they're pumping it out through the fuel pools, is vented. It's on purpose. They're poisoning you on purpose. And the food, they're looking for very productive areas. Not only that, the fresh water and the salt water, they're targeting that worldwide. They see water as an enemy for some reason. Of course, without water, none of us can have a future. Without water, we're going to look like the moon. Same thing without carbon, we're going to look like the moon. So everything they're blaming carbon on is the result of 80 years of anthropogenic man-made releases from the nuclear industry and the dumping and everything else, the so-called accidents. All the accidents seems to be engineered accidents on top of that. This is a new plant you want to build in the United Kingdom, surrounded by farms. And in Japan, they're growing food, like 14 prefectures. That's half the country, because these are the large prefectures. Were banned by 55 countries for a decade. The food from them. Japan is so insane, they're growing food right alongside the 1 ton bags of radiation in the nuclear meltdown zone, surrounded in hundreds of miles in any direction by nuclear no-go zones, radioactive nuclear wastelands. But they can't live there, they can't stay there, they can only go in there and harvest the food and get out of there again. And they shouldn't be doing that. It's just that they're hiring the people that are complacent, right? Because they're complacent because they believe the perpetual propaganda. And so how long are we going to tolerate this? Well, how long can we tolerate this before we poison everything and everybody is the big question. French government set to extend the life of 4 United Kingdom nuclear disease factories. 7 reasons to be skeptical about small modular reactors. Well, they don't exist, and they don't exist, and oh, that's right, they don't exist. Oh, by the way, did you know that they don't exist? They're promising. They're not even promising. They got to use plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which is illegal in Canada. It's illegal in the United States, by the way. Yeah, they're going to change the law, the law to accommodate them, but that doesn't make it legal. Just because they're in a position to do it, that don't mean they got the moral or ethical high ground. But commercializing them will be difficult and require staggering amounts of money. Staggering is being pretty polite. Nvidia is on a tear. Its stocks are up nearly 200% this year. The maker of the semiconductors for artificial intelligence is now worth $3.3 trillion. Artificial intelligence is the worst thing can happen to humanity. It's supposed to be the best thing can happen, but this industry with its legacy predicated upon predatory actions upon the humanity and the species is clearly what is going to happen is it's not going to get any better. It's going to get way worse for us much quicker, much more. They're counting on utilizing it to ninny us to death forever. But the meme stock at the moment is the degenerate new scale. Stocks are up 844% this year, but last year they lost all their money. So having their stocks go up 844% by manipulating people into buying their stocks, which Motley Fool, by the way, that's all they really do, don't they? We cover them every couple of weeks with the same Ponzi scheme. Recently called it unstoppable. That's meant to get speculators to buy into it or to sell the stocks that they know are worthless. These are worthless stocks. right? NuScale has already ripped off its investors, is already in a class action lawsuit for bilking investors out of billions of dollars, right? So it originally then went, because it's backed up by the Canadian government or the American government, it went down to South Korea where it carried out another Ponzi scheme, right? Early at the beginning of this year. And then now they pushed the fabled, the fairy tale small modular reactors, which are not going to exist for 30, 40, 50 years. So why would you invest in it now? But they successfully has the investors who don't understand nuclear, and they look at these numbers. Oh wow, 844%. I'm buying that, right? Because they'll tell them, oh, remember what happened to Bill Gates stocks? Remember what happened to Apple stocks? You want to get in now? Now's the time. And then 2 weeks later, it falls out. They sell their stocks to try to recover some money back because they worked all their life in the factory. The nuclear industry comes back in with all the money they just made. That stays in their bank account. They buy the stocks dirt cheap again. They wait for 2 weeks and rinse and repeat the fabled. Small modular companies are profitable. How can you be profitable when you don't have a product? Through a Ponzi scheme, right? NuScale lost $168 million during the first 3 quarters of the year. $63 million. Oklo has been targeted by short sellers. They're not targeted by short sellers. The investors have ran away again. Every 2 or 3 weeks, the investors run away. Then they come out with all these headlines. Oh, Facebook and Amazon is all buying small modular reactors. You got to buy it now. I got to buy stocks now. Now is the time. And then a week and a half, 2 weeks later. And apparently, the regulatory agency is a non-regulatory agency. It allows this to happen every 3 weeks. It's like clockwork. You can actually set your calendar to buy and sell uranium stocks and small modular reactor stocks to the 2.5, 3 week period. 2.5, 3 weeks later, sell it. 2.5, 3 weeks later, buy it. 2.5 weeks after that, sell it. And make incredible profits each time through this dump. As one industry veteran told me, these companies don't have the wallets to make it happen. The small modular reactors companies don't have the foundation, but they're able to build equity that shouldn't exist through the stock market pumping their stocks to the unsuspecting retirees and that. That's what it's all about, looting the victims. How presidential impeachment works in South Korea. So, Yoon, South Korea president is suspected of violating constitution or other laws. The National Assembly can propose an impeachment motion, which is happening right now. It's supposed to come to fruition tonight or tomorrow, I guess, with the support of a majority of members. The motion goes to vote 24 to 72 hours after the Speaker of the Assembly reported it to the Parliament, the Congress, so-called, in North America. It requires the approval of at least 2/3 of the members to pass, in which case the president is suspended from office. And then the Constitutional Court then has 180 days to hound down a final ruling on whether the president should be impeached. If 6 or more, and because they're rioting in the streets down there, they brought in martial law because the dictator that they got down there, President Yoon, so he was a former prosecutor, we've covered him a lot, who said Fukushima didn't happen. We covered him before he became the prime minister, the president of South Korea, right? This creepy creature right there. He's a former federal prosecutor who's lost power and then called martial law and had to retract it on the same day. But there's actually videos of Parliament members grabbing onto the guns of the soldiers trying to stop them from entering their workplace, which is the government's office, because this creature panicked. And unfortunately, he should be another Shinzo Abe. Yoon is under growing criticism over his declaration of emergency martial law just hours before reversing the course and lifting the decree. Well, the Parliament rejected him, right? But in order to stay in power, he's willing to go to the extremes and take away the entire country's civil liberties and freedoms so that he can have a few more days of power. They got to go. We don't need a government. We just need employees to pick up this and do that. Each community, the whole country should vote on everything the money is going to get spent on collectively in the country. The government's job is to destroy your ability to have a future and to be able to save money and to be able to pass that money on to your loved ones. 6 opposition parties submitted the bill, which said it is clear the declaration was issued despite the fact emergency martial law is not necessary. Same as the shithead Trudeau done in Canada. It also said declaring, and his father was the only other guy to do it. It's really something, isn't it? It also says declaring emergency martial law violates the Constitution and an act of betrayal against the people. This, so that he can stay in power. South Korea lift presidential martial law decree after lawmakers reject the military rule. Who appear likely to be impeached over his actions, which is most likely going to happen tomorrow. He's going to be suspended for 180 days until the constitutional courts figure out if he can be held accountable. Eliminate the anti-state. Now, he's a former prosecutor, so which is typical of these people in those positions anyway. Frustration with the opposition vowed to eliminate the anti-state forces as he struggled against opponents who control the parliament that he accuses of sympathizing with the communist North Koreans. Sympathizing. Well, you've isolated them for 70 years. And then Japan controlled North Korea for 50 years before that. Japan only left North Korea because of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? And North Korea has been under siege, land, air, sea embargoes, collective punishment for 72 years. And when the United Nations went down, they burnt their first military excursion. It used to be the League of Nations, right? So they changed their name to United Nations after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They accrued a huge army, navy, military, air force. They invaded North Korea as a police action, where they left millions dead, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans. They burnt down every little tiny village, every little town, every little community, every little city. They burnt down all the infrastructure in the country. And now they had 72 years of land, sea, and air embargoes against the country. And then uses them to demonize them collectively, while they're committing crimes against humanity in 90 countries at any given time. Lawmakers would protect democracy with the people. Soldiers and police turning against the population because of a politician. Instead of holding the politician account, they turned against the population because legally they could do it. There was this gray zone, and they decided to go for it. Facebook seeks up to 4 gigawatts of new nuclear power to help meet artificial intelligence. You're talking about the energy you need for 4 million homes and businesses. Well, it's actually, you're talking about 5 million homes and businesses. A typical large nuclear power plant is 0.8 gigawatts, basically. So, yeah, you're talking 5 gigawatts, not for 5 million homes and businesses. For artificial intelligence. Why do they need that kind of artificial intelligence if it's not going to be a weapon against us? Really, why? And then the emissions from 5 gigawatts is catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. And they say, well, just companies, Facebook and Instagram, large-scale, small modular reactor proposal. What are you talking about? They don't even exist. You can't call nuclear clean power. But they did acknowledge they're going to put up a SAGE geosystem, provide 150 megawatts of geothermal in 2027. So why not go all in? If you can do 150, you can do the rest of it. And it's still going to be endlessly cheaper than disease factories. The only reason nuclear is in the equation is to artificially inflate the importance of those disease factories known as nuclear power plants. Facebook/Meta's nuclear RFP follows a string of nuclear-related announcements from large technology companies this fall, who were all denied by the regulatory agencies, whose announcements originally a couple of months ago artificially inflated the stocks of these small modular reactor companies that were going under. The majority of them would have went under if it wasn't for these companies saying they're going to order a small modular reactor. You can't order a small modular reactor when they haven't even produced one to go through a regulatory agenda. Like you'd have 5-6 years just for the application to go through the regulatory agencies, let alone to build it, let alone to run it, let alone to figure out what the flaws are and re-engineer it and rebuild another one, get the flaws out of that before you can start mass producing it. When we're hearing the dying cries of the nuclear industry, and they're going to try to take down everything and everybody and destroy everybody's ability to come up with solutions. Why they hang on. Nuclear should be sacrificed immediately. In September, Microsoft and Constellation Energy announced a 20-year purchase agreement that would support the reopening of the Crane Clean Energy Center, which is Chris Singh's facility, formerly known as 3 Mile Island. The reason 3 Mile Island closed is because it's decrepit. It's been bombarded with neutrons for decades past its normal lifespan. In October, Google and Kuro Power announced a deal to build and operate 500 megawatt fleet of small advanced reactors by 2035. How is that going to happen when you don't have an application into the regulatory agency to even conceive of building it? Kuro Power doesn't have any land, no intentions of building it. They don't have the investments. There's zero possibility they're going to build it. It's zero possibility. Amazon revealed a $500 million investment in X Energy, a small modular reactor developer. How can you call it a small modular reactor developer when you don't even have an application into the regulatory agency? I can say I'm a small modular reactor developer. I'm actually closer than any of them are ever going to get to it. They're not building the equipment. They're not building the design. They're not spending money. Like just the designer, you're looking at $500 million, $2 billion in architects and engineers for wages. We're not seeing any. We're seeing all kinds of posturing. That's it. It's vapor is all we're seeing. Everything is vapor. Amazon may separately deploy small modular reactor 300 megawatts of generating capacity near the Dominion Energy North Anna Nuclear Power Disease Factory in Virginia through a memorandum of understanding with the investor-owned utility. But what are you talking about? They don't have a reactor. There is no small modular reactors. The ones Canada got are 24 stories. The boiling water 300 are 24 stories, right? The General Electric, Hitachi. It looks like a float, but it's an oceanic nuclear power plant. It's created an unexpected effect. So this is their small modular reactor on the ocean. It's just as deep as it is tall. It's like a 10, 12-story building. They're calling it a small modular reactor. Yeah, you can put it on the back of a flatbed trailer and tow it up to your site. Like again, they're just looking to trick and manipulate and deceive the unsuspecting investors into throwing their money their way, and they're never going to get their money back. And whatever they get back is going to be an incredible loss. And they worked all their lives in factories and everything else, and these small modular reactors have every intention to rob them of their life savings. It's not just a Ponzi scheme, it's an evil scam. It's an evil scam. And they've been doing this for the last 13 years straight. When is the world going to make a stand, I wonder? Why is this world so full of cowards? It doesn't look like an oceanic nuclear. It looks like a float. It's literally the stupidest looking thing you ever saw. And so, like, we've covered these companies over and over and over and over. Core Power. We covered these companies over and over and over. They're going to build this, they're going to tow it up, and they're going to anchor it off, and they're going to plug it into the local grid. And everybody's going to be washing their hair with nuclear power, and everybody's going to be awesome. And it never comes to fruition, ever. Don't even look good on paper. They don't have money, and they don't have applications into the regulatory agency. It means it's not going to happen. Because that's the bottom line, isn't it? Experience is a consideration of fusion power plant design safety and safety assessments. Like this International Degenerate Atomic Energy Agency. These are the worst humans conceivable. Insight into the safety consideration for a prototype. Believe nothing the International Atomic Energy Agency tells you. Zero. Believe nothing whatsoever. They're the worst humans we've ever come across, and we come across them every single day. NATO warns of Russian support for North Korean nuclear program. Once again, demonizing a country that is seeking nothing but being in a position where they could defend themselves when you guys decide that you need a war to get rid of your excess weapons. NATO's not supposed to exist. It was created in opposition to the Soviet Union. And so when the Soviet Union was dissolved, the scumbags that done that, and all the pensions and patents of that country were dissolved at the same time, remember? What a horrific thing to do to a country. Take away their pensions and their patents. And then so NATO was created, allegedly, because North America wasn't technically advanced as the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was curb stomping them technically. And so NATO was an alliance originally of 28 militaries. Now it's 32 militaries. If you look up NATO, that's what it'll say. You'll see it in Wikipedia everywhere else. 32 militaries. And there's no one to control them. Yeah, the American government, the president allegedly controls NATO. But that's not true either. They got aircraft carriers, they got nuclear weapons, they got jet fighters, they got submarines, military, Air Force, Navy, and no one to hold them accountable. And they're doing it without the consent of the countries. They're doing it with the consent of the militaries. It's such a betrayal that there's nothing good going to come out of it. They're crying for a war to go in and bomb a country because they got all these genocidal machines. There's nothing good can come out of it. NATO Secretary General is posing a global threat to a threat to global security. That's what NATO is doing. Right now, it's using Ukraine as a proxy war against Russia. But who's the winner of all of these wars? It's the weapons producers. Right? It's Martin Grumman, Boeing, it's General Electric. It's the 10 weapons producers that needs conflicts to sell their weapons, to sell their missiles and their stupid fucking drones. Excuse the language. The drones really drives me nuts. NATO must focus on military aid for Ukraine. Like I done when Ukraine and Russia first started. I done a video saying Ukraine should surrender rather than destroy the country, the infrastructures, the legacy, the heritage. I got a good one for you. Hang on here. Nothing's too good for you guys, you folks. Dana's going to bring it on home here in a second. I got a few doozies. Let me bring up a few doozies. I got some headlines there you might remember. Wait for it, though. You'll get a kick out of this stuff. Yeah, there's one. Two. La 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 la. I'll get there. Wait for it. I gotta do this right later. Maybe the weekend I'll get it done. We're almost here. You'll get a kick out of this. Wait for it. Yeah, what they done originally, I'm going to show you these originally headlines, and you're going to go, oh crap, I forgot all about this stuff. The patriotism movement went nuts worldwide. And anybody yeah, this is great. Let me get two more. I'll try to get two more while I screw up everything. Yeah, this stuff is like gold. Yeah, we're almost there. One more. Let me get one more. I just need one more headline. Bear with me. We're almost there. I was really shocked. Maybe we'll just go ahead with what I got here. Oh, there's a good one. I need one more. Here, let's go with this anyway. La 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 la. Here. Ice cream fundraiser brings in $100,000 for Canadian. Remember? There's Girl Scouts out there selling cookies for so the Zelensky can buy weapons. Ottawa flag shop can't keep up with demand for Ukrainian flags. Student donates hundreds of dollars to help the orphanage refugees from Ukraine. They were pulling on heartstrings from every direction, weren't they? I mean, there's 90 conflicts going on at that. 94 conflicts were going on when that started. And everybody's eyes was on Ukraine, and the hell with the other 90 wars going on. Quebec City, with non-profit organization, it's going to take all the refugees. Well, how did you know there was going to be refugees right away? The national anthem will be played before jazz game, sports game. High school holds a drive donating supplies to Ukraine. Now to raise money to buy weapons for Ukraine so NATO can have a proxy war. Photographers, anybody that was promoting the war was put on a pedestal. Man, woman, and child. Man raises money, gives it directly to refugees at the Ukraine-Poland border, promoting the evacuations. Leonardo DiCaprio, the degenerate. Fourth grader auction off toys to help the Ukrainian refugees. It wasn't. The money was all going to the weapons manufacturer. Unless you went there and physically gave it to the refugees, it went to the weapons manufacturer. Sony halts PlayStation in Russia due to Ukraine. Due to NATO, see? Forget Ukraine. There's NATO's behind it. Ukraine is just a sacrificial lamb. And there's how many millions of people lost everything? They're actually killing each other with drones that chase each other, that chase the conscripted victims down and blow them up. And if they don't die, another drone comes in and finishes them off. We've never seen nothing like that before. A war of horror. That's the only way you can describe this one. Northern Alberta firefighters donate old gear to Ukraine. House approval of Ukraine aid, and he drops the COVID funds to give money to Ukraine. They switch gears from one scam to the next one. Names a road to lead to the Russian embassy, Ukraine Hero Street. I mean, it was sickening. Adwin's anti-nuclear stance in a pro-nuclear liberal government. This is in New Brunswick. It's quite an interesting story. It was a well-done story, too. Fredericton MP appears at a launch of research projects that shows mostly one side of the Indigenous views on nuclear energy and radioactive waste. Count on the media to cut your throat. The MP is over there. Janika Atwin, the Liberal MP for Fredericton, Canada, New Brunswick, and former Green politician, took to a podium at the St. Thomas University last Friday as one of the speakers at the launch of a new research report and video highlighting opposition by the Indigenous communities to nuclear projects. Because they're planning on putting more reactors now in New Brunswick, right? In the Bay of Fundy. I dove the Bay of Fundy with a 50-foot tide exchange. Don't think that wasn't a nightmare. She was in an uncomfortable position representing a federal Liberal government that's unabashedly pro-nuclear. Revoltingly pro-nuclear. The report notes that a new federal government plan, Building Canada Clean Future, aims to get nuclear projects built faster with fewer regulation. Canada's clean energy future. The industry is so revolting in so many ways. One of the forwards in the study was written by her stepfather, Ron Tremblay, who is a non-elected chief, and says Mother Earth has been raped by the environmental damage, such as Point Lepreau nuclear disease factory, which is 16.4 million trillion atoms a year legally into the environment, which is more than most reactors worldwide combined of tritium-3H. It was built on the traditional territories without the people's consent, even though it produces dangerous radioactive waste that could last thousands of years, hundreds of millions of years anyway. Iodine-129 is 150 million a year, for instance. And curium is 250,000 years. Despite newspaper reports to the contrary, which is 20 times more dangerous than the plutonium, they did not actually formally accept to have a deep geological repository on their territories. I'd clarify that the Wabigoon Lake First Nations did vote in favor of continuing the dialogue of the deep geological, the big hole in the ground where they're going to dump the nuclear waste. But at the moment, despite newspaper reports to the contrary, they did not actually formally accept to have a deep geological repository on their territory. Right? And this is a fact, right? All they was like, because if you participate in the narrative, then they throw a couple $1 million at you each time. So it was an easy way and to get their nose in the door for the non-nuclear waste management organization, basically. Because otherwise people wouldn't give them two seconds. You throw a few $1 million in each community every year, you get their attention, like, yeah, we don't like you, but we'll take your money. Nuclear energy is a good alternative to burning fossil fuel, which is not. Greenhouse gas doesn't threaten to keep warming the Earth, making it unlivable. That's nuclear. Everything they're blaming on the so-called carbon, greenhouse gas, which is carbon, can't have trees or plants or insects or flora or fauna or the 8 million species or puppies or anything else without carbon. Everything on the planet is already acclimated to carbon through genetic superior selection. Right? That's why we exist, because we can coexist perfectly with carbon. But the anthropogenic man-made stuff, there's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. The 7 First Nations, whose communities hugged the New Brunswick northern and eastern shores in 2023, announced they would make financial investments in both Moltex and the ARC nuclear farms, which are the small modular reactors. Why would you invest in them? They only exist because New Brunswick gave them $5 million each. And they don't even have a fuel source. They need plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which is illegal in Canada. When we see them receiving $2 million in share values from Moltex, which are worthless, and $1 million in share value from ARC. Although the details remain unpublicized and critics question whether it will amount to anything, given the struggles of both companies to raise private funds. No, this is another Ponzi scheme. There will be no Moltex reactor. There will be no ARC reactor. Go ahead and rob the native community, which are struggling, of resources they desperately need. That's the norm in the nuclear industry. That's all it's really good at, and making everybody sick. And Indigenous leaders said they stuck to a historical, unprecedented deal to help avert a global warming crisis. What are you talking about? Global warming is not caused by carbon. Carbon doesn't pulse energy every second. Carbon doesn't end up in your troposphere and block the sun. That's absurd to suggest that. It's anthropogenic man-made radiation that has those particular attributes. Seabrook, nuclear plant owner accused of dirty tricks, hit with a $350 million antitrust lawsuit. Dirty what they done. That's so dirty. See, the only thing that matters to them is them. Everybody else can get sick and die. And they will. I mean, my goodness, hey? What they done and continue to do, this nuclear industry, it's simply not. You're destroying everybody's future. That's what they're doing. That's all they're really good at. Is Facebook seeking 4 gigawatts of new nuclear power, also known as disease factories, to meet an artificial intelligence a threat to humanity? Yes, it is. Just the emissions from the fuel pools is going to be a threat. Hi everybody, hugs for everybody. The Finnegan 27 wants to know the level of waste produced. It's 5 times more fuel rods, high level waste, because they're so inefficient. On top of that, the small modular reactors. It's 35 times more high level waste, and it's 30 times more intermediate level waste. And that was a study by a former regulatory commissioner from the United States. I'm trying to remember her name now. She is a professor in British Columbia, Canada. And her students produced that study, which really threw a great big stump into the nuclear industry's plan. We got 24 likes after all that work. Almost 2 hours of hard work tonight. Took forever to put all this together. And our videos are censored, especially the last couple of videos. Incredible censorship. Terrifying censorship. James Lewis put out another song. We're going to play that tonight. We're going to play that. I'm just going to bring it up here. Find it. James has about 180 songs. And he's going to pass me soon. He's at 1.45 thousand subscribers. I'm only at 1.6 thousand. And since he started posting music, his site has just exploded. I hope he passes me like in another week. That would be pretty cool. He put out a new song, Manufacturing Nuclear Consent. I'm going to play that. We're going to play that tonight. Manufacturing Nuclear Consent. But, thank you, Dana Nasana. Hi, everybody. Have a great night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. We never got very many comments tonight. Wow. Got very few likes. Probably got a lot more, but they don't register because the nuclear industry spends its entire time censoring me. This song starts off that James got there. Yeah, Willingness. This song is it's a brand new song he just put out a few hours ago. Give it a minute and you'll find that it's actually pretty cool. We'll see everybody tomorrow night.
They say nuclear will save the day, yet oceans bleed where the corium carved away. Tide pools emptied, life stripped bare, a legacy cloaked in polluted air. The lobby roars, the people stall, they hawk the cure that sickens us all. The banners cry their scripted song, while we're left to wonder what went wrong. Manufacturing nuclear consent, their truths are bent, their lies well spent. Behind the mask, a plan unfolds, while we inherit the ash and cold. Beneath their towers, the fractures grow, silent risks that few will know. Regulators nod, the deal is done, while profit eclipses everyone. Oh, it's manufacturing nuclear consent, a cost they take, a future rent, a broken promise, a fractured claim, where shadows rise to stake their claim. The rivers writhe, the forests fade, their reckless wages steeply paid. A radiance dims, a beacon dies, as ruins swell beneath our skies. Manufacturing nuclear consent, a world dismantled, a fate they spent. Control is sold, the rock expands, and we're left clutching poison sands. They promise light.
We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Last night's song got cut off. They've done that before, so I just want everybody to know. We only played half the song tonight. I got to go to the little men's room. We'll see everybody